Hello and welcome. It's not the Dougie's Dungeon podcast because I don't have a guest right now, so we're doing something a little bit different. We're gonna call it Dougie's Dougie's DM Diary. Yeah, that works. All right, so basically, since I don't have a guest, I'm gonna try something a little different, and so this is what we're gonna do. I have an upcoming stream game that I'm going to be doing session 04 here this Sunday, and then we're going to be scheduling a live play Dungeons and Dragons game. It's actually Pathfinder First Edition, so if that interests you, come check it out whenever I announce it. This is kind of an announcement, but um, it's going to be with some streamers on from TikTok and stuff like that. It's going to be me as the dungeon master. It's going to be 5 javelins. It's going to be Meg the sorceress. It's going to be the tabletop nerds. There's 2 of them, and then Phil Edhart. Um, I'm probably butchering. Andrew Phil Hart from TikTok as well. He does 8-bit monsters. But anyway, so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be making the town that they're going to be starting in. And so I figured I'd kind of walk through my process as I create this town, and kind of give my insights as to why I do things a particular way and why I approach things a certain way. So we're just going to jump right into it. I have basically 4 bullet points that I really focus in on whenever I am trying to homebrew a new town or city or any settlement, essentially. So the purpose of the location of the settlement, threats to the townsfolk, and potential allies and antagonists for the party. So we're going to jump right into the first one, the purpose of the town. You really want to focus on the reasons why you're creating this settlement, this town, this thorp, this city, both in game and out of game. So I'll go into kind of detail about that. So in this particular town, what I want to do is in game, I want to showcase the lifestyle of the adventurer, like the Adventurers Guild in my world, as opposed to the average NPC. So that's just going to be the overall theme of this entire, basically, encounter with this town. I want to really hone in and focus on the difference between the player characters and just the average NPCs in the world, because in my world, it's a pretty stark difference. Adventurers are seen as heroes, not something to be feared or hated or anything like that. Because I know in a lot of other worlds, adventurers are seen as basically murder hobos, and I want to basically show that in my world, they are not viewed that way. So that's what I'm doing with this particular settlement. And then out of game, I'm going to set the tone. What I want this settlement to do is set the tone for the rest of the game. And the tone is going to be dark for my campaign setting. It's a pretty dark setting. That doesn't mean there isn't any good out there. It's just harder to find. But yeah, those are the things that I'm doing. But you could do other things with yours. In-game showcasing, what you want to do with your settlements is kind of just going to inherently happen. Whether you want to or not, it's going to showcase things to your players. Because every time you sit down and you run games for your players at your table, you're going to be training them how to play, regardless of what you think. Every time you sit down, every time you make a ruling, a statement about something in the game, you're teaching them and training them how to play in your game at your table. And so what I do is I pay attention to those cues and I hone in on what I want to teach the players. And so whenever I create magic items, settlements is what we're going to be focusing on today, but magic items or settlements or classes or something like that, you want to pay attention to what you are training your players to do and how they approach things and how they act. Out of game, for me, like I said, I want to set the tone for the game. But you could do other things with this. This like the reason that you could be making a town is maybe you found something online and you'd really like to try it out. That's a good enough reason, and just like really trying to emulate what that location does or what that item does in and out of game, it's a really good thing to do. It's always a good thing to think about why you're doing things, especially when you're dungeon mastering. I know a lot of people tend to fly by the seat of their pants and do a lot of improv, and that is okay, but it is important to pay attention to your internal process while you are improving, like where you pull things from and what they will mean long term, even though they are still improv. Then the next thing I want to get into is the location of the settlement. This is actually the most important. I have 4 bullet points for this thing alone, and I like to think about it in this regard. So when you pick a location of the settlement, there's 4 main things you really need to think about. Is the location hazardous, neutral, or peaceful in their environment, in their local environment? Something that is hazardous could be they're on the edge of a forest that's got a lot of fae, and so it is dangerous to live there because the fae will steal children, steal people, or monsters. It could be next to an active volcano, so there's a hazardous environment just around the settlement because that'll shape the outward attitude of the people that live there. If they are constantly having to survive and live in hazardous locations, they might have a more nihilistic approach to the party members. They might have more pessimistic approach. Their day-to-day is mostly encompassed by survival, so they won't care. They're indifferent to anything but survival. And then you can go the opposite way of that. Peaceful. Like you can have an entire peaceful settlement, and this will also shape the way that the people in that settlement will react to the players. If it's a peaceful location, any amount of violence or threat of violence will have much more impact. The people will be more cautious around the adventurers with weaponry, because that is essentially the threat of violence. And then you could have like a neutral, location. It's, not necessarily peaceful, not necessarily hazardous. I like to think of just like metropolis cities are always kind of just neutral. There's like, they might have city guards and stuff like that, but there's just too much shenanigans and things going on behind the scenes to really say the location is safe or peaceful in a city. So I like to think of cities, like big metropolis sprawling cities are always going to be neutral threat, no matter what. The next thing, I know I got a lot of flack on TikTok for this, but how water and food are sourced for the settlement is really, really important. This will fundamentally change how you approach like the structure of this settlement. So I guess I'm going to go through this entire list of all these things I'm going to talk about, and then I'm going to basically decide what I'm going to do with this settlement that I'm creating. So we'll get through this entire list that I have, and then then I guess we'll go into the nitty-gritty details of what I'm doing for this campaign. So how water is sourced, that's really important. If it's just like a central well system, it's pretty standard, run-of-the-mill. This is going to be in your local like small thorp or village, local watering hole, But when you start thinking of bigger settlements like cities or established villages and stuff like that, they're going to have a water system of some sort. Like how is it sourced for the individual? How is it dispersed throughout the settlement? And this is really important because aqueducts, sewer systems, these are locations for encounters, and these are things that you need to be thinking about whenever you create your world, because it's largely going to determine where your threats come from and like the aspects of survival and the environment. but it's going to really characterize your settlement as opposed to any of the other ones. So, like, for instance, just kind of what I'm thinking, where I want water to be sourced for the settlement is I really like the idea of it being hidden behind a waterfall. So water would be no issue. Food would also not be an issue either, because then they could just fish in the local stream, or I think I'm going to do a lake. It goes from a stream into a lake. And so they're hiding behind, like, in the cliff face, essentially in a cave system behind the waterfall. That's what I'm thinking for this town. I like the idea. But this makes that distinction, where's water and food sourced, a really simple situation. It may not be that way. Is it a hunter and gathering society where, they have like the local hunter? They go out into the forest. They are, the local ranger or the druid that goes out into the forests, gets things from the dangerous forest, brings it back for other people, and then they buy, meat off of, he goes to the local butcher, sells it to the butcher, that kind of stuff. That creates an entire economy in just thinking about how food is sourced. That's the kind of stuff we got to think about whenever you're creating lively settlements. That's what we want, is lively settlements. Places that live and breathe just like our world does. That's what we want to emulate. You may think that, this is going into way too much detail, but then again, this is just 4 bullet points on a list of, well, I guess there's more bullet points than 4, but like, this is one of the 4 main questions that I think for about a specific location. It's not that big of a deal. Next thing we're going to focus on is defenses for the settlement. How defenses are handled in any given society, again, will shape the society. In our world, in the United States at least, I'm going to speak for the United States, we have a police system. There are complaints about the police system in any given city. You could do something similar for your world. I personally don't like to go that way. I like to make guards and like towns guards and city guards, I like to make them more of, serving the people and basically like a volunteer thing, less so like a job or something like that. Like I like to have like the idea of like a rotation. Like, this is just your civic duty. You got to do it for 2 years out of, adulthood. You work as a town guard. It's kind of like a local enlistment. That's how I do it in my world. You don't have to do it this way. But thinking about how the defenses of any given city is a pretty good idea, an indication of the, I guess, threat level to the players. Because if they start any shenanigans, they're going to have to be dealing with the defense system of the city. This could go farther along, and you can think about encounters in the future. If this city is, or this location that you're developing is not as robust, it doesn't have a strong defense system, they might in the future be the target of an attack, a hostile takeover, anything. You can think of anything. So honing in on how the defenses are done, how they're handled, the day-to-day lives of like the guards and everything of a particular settlement is really important. This can lead you into a vast number of different world building things. These are basically questions that you can spider web off of. These are the basics that you got to start with and build from. I have some ideas that, like, I started with these questions and I came up with stuff that are completely unrelated to this settlement. So we'll get into those when I start going into what I'm doing with mine. And the last one for the location of the settlement, the last bullet point is, what does the inn look like? It's kind of simple. You can pick any other particular location. I like to pick inns because in my world and how I like to run games, The inn is where all of the adventurers make their stop. You always gotta pay attention to the inn. It's a classic, you know. They go into the inn, they get, you know, their food, they get their alcohol, they pal around, they tell stories around the campfire, they get in bar fights, they, you know, stay the night. Like, it's the theme of being an adventurer. So I really like to focus on, like, in every different location, what do the inns look like? How do they feel? Those are really important locations to me. But if you have a different idea for locations, like let's say you have a party of entirely made of clerics, right? They're not going to care about the inn. They're going to go to the local chantry or the local, worshipping location. And so I would instead of picking the inn is just what I pick, but instead of picking the inn, you could pick that and you could focus on what this local chantry looks like. What do the practices of this particular chantry look like opposed to the other ones that the party has interacted with? Because that's world building. Like, that's those subtle differences that you can pour into your world that are really going to make it feel different and every settlement feel different. And that's what we want. We want every settlement to feel different. And these are just simple, easy questions that can help you branch off and do other things and figure out world building for other things. And then also just make this one settlement really cool. So the next thing we're going to be talking about, the next major point is threats to the townsfolk. This is really important because this is whenever you have players go to location, this is how you're basically going to come up with monsters ahead of time. Like, if you know what the threats are at any given settlement, at any given time beforehand, you're not going to have any issue whatsoever just, you know, pulling out a stat sheet, you know, and running an encounter if the players run into something really quick. Just knowing what a location's threats are to the townsfolk, you know, that can include the players. Anytime you can do that, it's a good thing to do because it's just pre-planning. So, like, threats to the settlement, I break it up into two different threats. I do threats from inside the settlement and threats from outside the settlement. Threats from inside the settlement could be like corrupt politicians, serial killers, an infestation of a particular monster. Those are threats from inside the settlement. And then threats from outside the settlement could be things like trade embargoes, monsters attacking people on the road in and out of the settlement, the potential threat of war from a different faction. You can, your imagination's the limit with this, but I would definitely think about what the potential threats are to any given settlement are ahead of time. It's really important. This will allow you to get ahead of the curve and not be surprised by your players, and will allow you to plop down an encounter really easy on the fly. This is how I approach pretty much every situation. Whenever I'm running like even a one shot and I have the book in front of me and I know what's going to be there, I will go grab other NPC charts, other monster charts, stuff like that I know can be there because I think ahead of time. What are other potential threats that aren't offered in this one shot, aren't offered in the module? And then that way you're never really surprised when you're pulled off book and caught off guard when you're pulled off book. So that's what I think about. And then the last thing, probably the most important actually, is potential allies and antagonists in the settlement. This could literally be anyone, and you don't have to pick a particular NPC. You can, of course, make a particular NPC, but you do not by any means have to make a particular NPC. What I do is I pick NPC archetypes. I'm talking like innkeepers, town guard, shopkeeps, magistrates, elected officials of any sort, like the regular NPC, like the townsfolk. You can talk about beggars. Like, are they allies or antagonists? Because you know your party. You know what. I mean, this is obviously going to be the first session, so I don't know yet. But if you're creating a settlement that's in the middle of your game and you need some help creating a settlement, knowing who populates that world and knowing who is against and with the players is a really good way to think about it. Because any adventure of any worth any salt would have a reputation. If that's good or bad, that's going to sway things. Also, if you have like kind of an idea what you want your plot to be in your settlement, what they're going there to adventure for, the reason for being there, you can kind of develop an idea of who would be against that plot being unfolded and who would help that plot unfold. So yeah, we're going to get into what I want to do, but we're going to go back to the top and I'm going to go through all of my things individually. And I'm going to kind of break down my thought process. I've kind of explained everything, but I'm going to break down my thought process on this particular settlement. So the purpose of the town, of my town that I'm creating, don't even have a name yet, so we'll figure that out. The purpose of this town in-game is going to be showcasing the adventure lifestyle as opposed to the average NPC. I don't really know how I'm going to do that yet, but I have kind of a general idea. I want the adventurers, or the players essentially, to feel very welcome to this location. So I will probably have the NPCs not necessarily awestruck, but more helpful than they normally would be. Adventurers are kind of seen as heroes in my world, but this town is having a problem. In this town that I'm creating, there's going to be an uprising of monster attacks. And so the NPCs would be relieved that the players are there. So they're going to definitely be more helpful than they otherwise would be. And so that'll kind of help showcase that adventurers are cherished. And hopefully this will curb any murder hoboism. Because if you're having problems with murder hoboism, what I have found to be the thing that works the best is just to make the NPCs look up to the players. They really, really won't want to disappoint anyone. Because disappointment and like having your heart hurt, like it never works out. So I kind of, obviously it's kind of playing mind games, but I want to avoid murder hoboism. So I'm going to have the NPCs look up to the players. Hopefully that'll curb the urge for them to just slaughter everything. Out of game, I really want to set the tone for the game. And the tone I want for my game is to be kind of dark. I like dark, seedy, underbelly plots in my games. I like a lot of gray. I'm not a huge fan of the black and white, good versus evil, because I feel like it's never really well done. When you start labeling things as just blatantly evil, it's a slippery slope, and I try to avoid it as much as possible. So a lot of gray for me. Not everyone is good, not everyone's bad. They're always kind of on a spectrum. So I know it doesn't really necessarily lend itself to like a dark fantasy, but I think what I'm doing with my world, the Brinklands, it's always on the brink of destruction. It's just kind of inherently going to be a dark setting, and that tends to be my style. So that's what we're going with. We're sticking with the classics, especially since this is the first streaming game I will be doing, live play. So yeah, that's kind of where my head's at with that. Location of the settlement. It's like I said before, it's going to be underneath a waterfall. It is going to be kind of neutral, more so hazardous now because of the uprising of monster attacks. We'll get into what those monsters are later. But on average, it's a pretty neutral location. It is outside the Great Citadel. The Great Citadel in my setting is the big safe zone. Think of Attack on Titan and the big castle with the Titans trying to break through the walls. That's kind of what it is. So the Great Citadel is the big grand settlement that's extremely safe. The walls have stood, hundreds of years. Nothing can penetrate them yet. But this settlement is outside of the Great Citadel. It's out in the frontier. But this one's kind of safe. It's hidden. And this is what I was kind of talking about, the location kind of leading into other world building. I was kind of going down to the defenses. The defenses of the settlement is the fact that it is hidden behind the waterfall. And the monsters from the land of Forever Night, those are the big, like, esoteric monsters that I have in my world. They come over on into the Daylight Lands. That's the basically, really quick, my planet is tidally locked and one side always faces the sun, so that means one side it's always daylight and the other side it's always nighttime. The land of forever night, the land of daylight. The monsters will come over whenever there's a solar or a lunar eclipse that blocks out the sun. The monsters can now travel. It's like a month-long eclipse. The monsters can now travel, so they all like try to get to the Great Citadel to get all the people to eat. So any settlement that's outside the Great Citadel will need to have good defenses if they want to survive. Well, this is hidden behind a waterfall. And I was kind of thinking, well, how would that work? How would that hide them? And I was, waterfalls, they produce a lot of moisture and particulates, and they create a lot of noise. This would do a lot to actually hide any amount of noise and any smells, because the smells in the air would attach themselves to the mist that's created and then kind of fall back to the ground. So that would actually prevent anyone or any creature from finding them. So now world building wise, water will hide you. Waters and waterfalls will hide you from the monsters from the land of forever night. So that's something that now I got to work on and start fleshing out, but that's for the future. How water is sourced and food is sourced, we talked about that earlier. Water's no difficulty. They're literally in a waterfall and they're in a cave system, so that means mushrooms, maybe some algae, moss maybe at the mouth of the cave system that they are in and stuff like that. So they'll have a pretty good diet. They'll obviously have fish and any local wildlife if they want to go hunt outside of that, because all the wildlife is going to come to the lake to get water. So food and water are covered. Pretty good place to be. And I wanted that to be kind of like the central the economy of this location. They can barrel up water and ship it with them to the Great Citadel every 10 years. They can migrate and they bring their resources with them. So that's their resource. That's what they trade. They trade fresh water and they trade food, fish, like local pond fish. That's not something that I think should be available in the Great Citadel. I think livestock, it's a city, livestock outside, inside, chickens, boar, cows, that's what they're going to have. So fisheries and stuff like that is going to be this settlement's economy, fisheries and fresh water. So that's where, see what we're doing? We're kind of building up the city a little bit, just thinking about these questions. A little bit more than what we bargained for with these questions. So we're kind of building upon things. Uh, the defenses, yeah, we already talked about that. So what does the inn look like? So since this is hidden behind a waterfall, I want it to be cavernous, like a cave system. So I thought it would be really cool to have an inn that, like, you check it, like the front of the inn, it just looks like a normal building just kind of smashed into a wall, you know? So it's just the front of a building, but as soon as you open the doors, it's just cavernous. And all the rooms are just tunnels that are dug out of the bedrock and all that kind of stuff. And since it still is underneath the waterfall and there's moisture that kind of seeps down, I want there to be like buckets of water everywhere that is dripping, and so they have to collect it. And since that's their currency, they collect the fresh water and it's been filtered out through the ceilings and stuff. They keep those and then they pour it in big vats and stuff and barrel it up. But that's like a passive income for anyone that lives here because it's actually filtered as opposed to like river water needing to be boiled. What else can we do with this? Oh, and I like a lot of the rooms to just be like at the ends of individual caves with a little hobbit door, like that you got to open up, and it's just like a bed that's like areas cut into stone. And so like your bed would be in the wall, which is like a mattress on top of it, and like the desk is there too, but it's also cut out of stone out of the wall, so everything would just be made of stone. The counters in the inn would be made of stone. The beds would be made of stone. Um, I really like that idea. So now we're gonna get into the nitty gritty. We're gonna talk about the threats to the townfolk. Um, Inside the settlement, I want the major conflict of my settlement to be a gang, like a ruffians guild or whatever, scoundrels, to be trying to take control of this food and water supply. Uh, like basically like an organized crime syndicate. And outside the settlement, it is going to be a monster that I kind of pulled from. Uh, we'll get into the monster at the very end and how I change it, but it's a monster. It's called the Ceratoide. Um, and they're going to be the monsters that originally were uh, originally pretty peaceful or docile per se, and then the gang is getting involved. The players don't know this, but the gang is getting involved and using um, some means to rile up the monsters to attack other people. Basically, they want to uh, target specific people in this supply chain for the food and water and have them attacked by monsters so that the crime syndicate can now take control. So I was trying to think of how I could go about this, and I was just kind of looking through like environmental stuff and traps, and I found something that's called a musk trap. So let me pull up the details for the musk trap. So it is a mechanical type trap, perception 20. Again, remember this is Pathfinder First Edition. It is found. The musk trap is found in the Ultimate Wilderness booklet on page 172. So if you want to look it up, but anyway, I'll go through it. Associated terrain is any, type is mechanical, perception is 20, disabled device is 20, trigger is location based, reset there is none. The effect. The effect is this trap hides a jury-rigged container of absorbent debris that has been soaked in the musk of prey animals. When a creature enters a square trapped with a musk shower, the trap makes a +10 melee touch attack against the creature. On a hit, the musk shower deals no damage, but douses the target in a strong scent. Creatures with the scent double the range at which they can smell the doused creature for 1 week, like a whole week, or until the musk is washed off with alcohol or other solvents. Creatures attacking the doused creature by smell gain a +10 bonus on perception and survival checks to track the target. Anyway, so I saw this and I thought maybe it's not musk of a predator or something like that, or of a prey that can still work, but maybe like pheromones that drive these creatures crazy, and because they're normally docile and they hadn't started attacking the townsfolk until the crime syndicate, like this is behind the scenes, but haven't attacked the townsfolk until the crime syndicate found whatever the pheromone this was that drove these Ceratoidi. I'm probably going to call them something else. That's what they are as a monster. But using these musk traps in like a whole week, that's a lot of time for them to douse somebody. And if it's pheromones, they won't be able to smell it. But it draws these creatures, the Ceratoidi, towards them and has them attack. I'm using the Ceratoidi for their monster abilities. I'm going to reflavor them as something else because I don't like what they're flavored as inherently. But when I look for monsters in the monster manual, I'm not looking for lore or particular attacks or anything like that. I'm looking for monster abilities. So we'll get into that. Just hold on. So that is going to be how I have the major conflict in this. The syndicate is trying to secretly use these creatures because it's also the Ceratoidi will also eat fish, so it is also kind of like a competition thing. If they can get the Ceratoidi blamed for the attacks, then what's going to happen is the mayor is going to commission adventurers to come and stop the Ceratoidi, hopefully wiping them out in the perspective of the crime syndicate. And then bing bada boom, that is 2 solutions. Not only do they gain more power because they're killing off people with the Ceratoidi, but the Ceratoidi are then wiped out by adventurers and they have no more competition for the food supply. They will have all the fish that the Ceratoidi are not consuming. So that's kind of how my brain works when I develop these encounters in these situations in the settlements. What would bring the players here? All right, potential allies and antagonists. These are going to be the NPCs who want this plot to happen and who do not want this plot to happen. So the antagonists are going to want this secret Ceratoidi murder plot to happen. These are going to be, these are going to be the shopkeeper. They're the ones that are going to have the trade routes, all the associates, all the resources to kind of to get this plot rolling. So obviously the ruffians and obviously the gang members or whatever, they're going to be the main antagonists, but these are going to be the people who support them and want their plot to be successful. I'm going to have the mayor or a mayoral figure. I haven't kind of decided what the title is going to be, but it's going to be the shopkeeper, the mayor, and the captain of the guard. But the allies are going to be the guard themselves, and I'm going to have a separate Ceratoidi called Guppy. He's going to be a friendly NPC of the creatures that are going to be attacking everyone to morally complicate things. And so we're going to get into how that will affect things later. But I really like the idea of the captain of the guard and the guard, like the actual guardsmen themselves, being at odds at each other. Because they have to follow the captain of the guard, but they don't know if they can trust the orders or what orders to trust. And they have the backing of the mayor, so it's not like they can go against it. This will really bring the players on the side of the guard, or like make the guard more willing to work with the players. Again, we're trying to avoid murder hoboism. And with Guppy adding moral complications to things, this is also hopefully going to help curb that murder hoboism that you see. And hopefully, my plan is that they will try to uncover what is actually happening, as opposed to just, jumping in, frying everything up, and then just booking it out of there. That's what I want to avoid. I want them to spend some time in this location and learn about this location, because it's out on the frontier. This is an important location. They will start in the Great Citadel, and by the I'd probably say the first quarter of the session, getting into introducing characters, setting up the plot for the story. By about like a quarter of the way in, they should be in this settlement. So adding some like complication in them, just instead of just having them come in, kill everything, and leave, that's what I want to avoid. I want them to spend time here. So adding moral complications, adding, allies on the side of the players to make them want to stay here and want to help is what I'm trying to focus and hone in on. So yeah, allies are going to be the Innkeeper, Town Guard, and Guppy, one of the Ceratorti. It doesn't matter which one, it's just one of them. The antagonists will be the Shopkeeper, because they're using their resources to help, and they'll basically get a cut of selling these resources. The mayoral figure, because they're the ones that are slyly helping this crime syndicate get into place and into power. The mayor obviously gets a cut as well, and the mayor, or the captain, is working with the mayor. Like, I don't know how that relationship's going to work yet. I'm thinking kind of like a spotty, kind of begrudging relationship between the mayor and the captain. Again, we're not going into statting them out. We're not going into any kind of detail. We're just talking archetypes. You don't got to stat anything out until, like, you're getting at the table. And most of the time I just hit points, their attack, and that's it. That's all you need. But, yeah, like, we're not statting out. We're not giving them names yet. You don't have to focus on that. We're just getting ideas out there to, build this city up. And then let's get on to the Ceratorti, because I want to talk about some of the lore stuff and implications I want this city to kind of talk about. So the Ceratorti, it's Ceratioidi. They can be found in Bestiary 3. Again, this is Pathfinder 1st edition. Bestiary 3 on page 50. I'm going to kind of go through the stats, tell you what I'm getting rid of, tell you what I keep, and why I chose this. So, quick description. This flabby, fish-like humanoid has a wide mouth, bulging eyes, and dangling luminescent flesh, lure of a deep-sea predator. Basically, think of like an anglerfish. They're basically humanoid versions of that. The description reads, rulers of deep ocean trenches, Ceratorti share several unusual traits with the aquatic predators of the Ceratidae family, also known as anglerfish. From their strange spired cities beneath the waves, Ceratorti cast their nets of influence far and wide. Perhaps the strangest aspect of the Ceratorti is that each individual is in fact two entities, a powerful, imposing female and a rat-sized parasitic male who spends most of his life attached to his mate's neck. A female without a mate loses her dual mind ability. We'll get into that. While a male unattached to a female retains his intelligence, but otherwise has the same statistics as an electric eel without the electricity special ability or electricity resistance. we're getting rid of that entire flavor text. We're keeping what it looks like and some of the aspects of it, but we are completely reflavoring it. I really like the idea of this being like a Morlock from World of Warcraft. It's a low level monster, so dealing with Morlocks, they're like pretty intelligent, I guess, because they have civilizations and stuff, but kind of just weird river creatures. They make that weird noise, like that whole thing. I want that, especially when you name them Guppy. So we're going with that kind of description, but we are keeping the distorted dual mind thing. So I like the idea of these monsters from the land of forever night coming over to the land of daylight and mutating and corrupting things. So I like the dual mind, and we're going to keep that monster ability. We're going to read the effect for dual mind. It is an extraordinary ability. The fact that each Ceratoid is in fact actually two creatures sharing the same body, it gives it a number of unique abilities. A Ceratoid can delegate various actions and physical processes to the individual minds, allowing it to fight with two weapons simultaneously without any penalties. It can also select two favored classes. A telepathic tangle between its twin consciousnesses makes a Ceratoid impervious to mind-affecting effects. We are keeping it specifically for that mind-affecting effects. This is going to be a low-level party. This is going to prevent them from using things like sleep, using things like color spray. These are two really incredibly powerful spells at first level for low-level encounters. This is a CR3 creature, by the way, but we're going to ignore that. But these are extremely powerful abilities and spells that the players have access to that will kind of just shut these things off. Again, I'm trying to prevent the players from being able to just wipe the floor with these monsters. So any kind of way that I can prevent them from just mass murdering is what I'm going to use. So we're going to use this monster ability and use the whole dual mind aspect to kind of world build a little bit. Since they're dual mind, I like the idea of maybe predator and prey were melded as like a sick joke by the monsters from the land of forever night. They came here, saw this, semi-intelligent creature that was was a predator to a fish, thought it as a sick joke, melded them together. Now predator and prey are one, and so this is why they are these weird esoteric creatures now. With this dual mind ability. Still two different separate creatures, but they are distorted. We're going for a dark world, a dark and gray world. So this could be why the pheromone works, or why the musk drives them crazy to the point of killing the townsfolk. That this is the kind of plot that we're kind of trying to unfold. So this is where my head's going. So we're going to go back to it. They have the lure, since they're kind of like an anglerfish. They have a lure ability. As a free action, a Ceratoid can light the dangling lure on its forehead, forcing all non-Ceratoid within 20-foot radius to make a DC 15 will save or become fascinated for 1 round. Regardless of the preceding interaction between the Ceratoid and its target, a creature affected by this ability does not view the Ceratoid who has fascinated it as a potential threat until the Ceratoid actually attacks, allowing it to approach without breaking the fascination. Once a creature successfully saves against this effect, it is immune to the same Ceratoid's lure ability for 24 hours. The DC is charisma based. So this really goes into how they are getting to these city folk, to these to the townsfolk, like how they're getting close enough to attack them, and why it's such a deadly problem that they've had to call adventurers. I really, really love this ability, especially since it could potentially, with a DC 15, fascination isn't necessarily a devastating effect on the players, but it can shut down at least one round of combat. Like, that's what we're kind of focusing on. Like, that's what, it's not a deadly effect. It's not going to kill the players outright, but it's an interesting effect that will stop the players in the tracks. And with a DC 15 at first level, that's pretty pretty likely to happen. And since it only lasts one round, it's not that big of a deal. We're going to go into their last ability. Primitive amphibian Ceratoidi have a rudimentary lung system capable of breathing air indefinitely, but their skin must be bathed in salt water. We're just going to say water regularly, or it begins drying out painfully. They can go for a number of hours equal to twice their constitution score, 30 hours for most Ceratoidi, before they need to be bathed in water. If they don't, they take 1 point of constitution damage per hour. Any constitution damage accrued is reversed after they spend at least 10 minutes immersed in water. That's irregardless to what we are doing with the creature. So let's go right into their AC and how we're going to change it. I use like a different AC system, but I see AC 15. That's pretty good. That's where I want it. HP 30 though, that's a little high. Adult red dragons in my games, because I don't have the players increase after their first health. Like basically at first level, that's the health for the rest of the game. So HP 30 is pretty drastic. Adult dragons in my game only have 50, so it'd be kind of ridiculous for this creature to have 30. So we're going to knock it down to, let's say, 10 hit points. Fort Reflex Will, we can kind of ignore that. We don't really need to worry about that until it comes up. Immune to mind affecting effects, that's one of the big reasons why we're choosing this creature. This creature has a speed of 30 feet, this is on land, and a swim speed of 50. I'm going to kind of swap it a little. I'm going to give him a land speed of 20 and a swim speed of 60. We want these things to be incredibly efficient in water. They are water predators. And a land speed of 20. I want this because whenever I'm going to throw several of them at the party, and I want them to be really menacing in the water, like incredibly fast in the water, but I want that effect of when they get out, it's like that slow fish crawl, like basically a fish coming out on land. And I like that imagery, and if it's slow towards the players, I feel like that's going to give the effect I want better. So we're going to slow their land speed and increase their water speed. Their melee attacks are 2 short spears at +8, at a 1d6 +3 for each one, or 2 slams with a +7 and a 1d4 +3. That 1d4 +3 is definitely what I am looking for, but I'm going to change their bonus to attack. I'm probably going to give them a +1 for the regular mooks, and then probably a +3, because again, the players are only level 1. So I'm probably going to give the bigger Ceratoidi, the bosses, a +3 to their attacks, and they're going to be doing 1d4 +3. I like that. Special attack is going to be their lure. We already went into that. We don't need to know any of their stats, their strength, dex, con. That's, you don't, if you're, I'm reading from the website if you're listening to this on Spotify, so you may not know. But you don't need any of that information. Their skills, I doubt they're going to come up other than the swim and stealth. Sense motive, perception might come in use, obviously, but their bluff, intimidate, we're not using these as we're not using them as humanoids. We're using them as a monstrous creature. So the likelihood of them using all these skills often, and me wanting to play them as Morlocks, I'm less interested in paying attention to that stuff. So yeah, that's the Ceratoidi. So now we're going to talk about Guppy and why I want to have a Ceratoidi on on the side of the players. So when I was thinking about the situation of how to morally complicate this encounter, one of the places that my mind went was I wanted to basically, make make the party friendly towards Guppy and have them exposed at a later time to the musk, to the trap, and see how the players will handle that. Because yes, it's combat, but it's combat in a situation, because the way I'm going to play Guppy is the Guppy is going to know that they are there to wipe them out. They know that they're like the crime syndicate, that the gang are using the musk to drive them mad, and they don't want, because remember, normally when the players approach the settlement, I'm going to have them I'm going to foreshadow this and show them that these, let's just call them Morlock or Ceratoidi, I'm going to show them off in the distance, like, watch the players approach, not do anything, just watch the players approach and kind of leave in fear. And so that way I can kind of foreshadow to this, where the players have now basically gained an ally of the Ceratoidi or the Morlock, and they know about this plot, but then they get exposed to this musk, and unless they have alcohol, which I doubt, like if they happen to have alcohol in their, like a solvent essentially in their starting pack, I'd be amazed. But I want them exposed to this musk and then have to deal with the moral implications of being attacked by these monsters that do not want to attack them. I think that would really, really kind of play into the dark gray setting that I have. And so that, to kind of wrap this whole thing up, that is the finale. Like, that's what I want the ending to be. I want that encounter, the player's decision. Like, it could go either way. I'm not trying to determine what the ending will be, but the finale will just be the situation that they have to deal with. And how they deal with that will really teach me, because I'm learning from the players too, will really teach me how they're going to approach the rest of the game. This entire encounter, and feel free to use any of this, any of my methods, any of my questions. Use it, steal it, it's yours. If I'm putting it up on the internet, it's there to be stolen. That's going to get me in trouble one day, but yeah, how about this? When it pertains to Dungeons and Dragons, anything that I put on the internet is there to be stolen. So, if you want to use this, go ahead. But, like, this is going to be what I use because I've never played with these players before. This will teach me how they are going to play their characters, how they're going to approach situations, if they're going to want to focus on role play or combat. Because if they're more combat oriented, they're probably just going to jump in, swords drawn, spells slinging, and solve the issue one way or another. I'm not going to hold that against the players. I'm not going to, drive a dagger in their back and make them feel bad. If they go that approach, I will probably just have them more involved with the crime syndicate. I'll probably just go into more detail about that and have them have to deal with the implications with the mayor. That's super easy to do on the fly. That's the kind of improv stuff that I can do. Really super simple, really super easy. But this is kind of where I'm gearing towards and what I'm hoping for. And this will really help me learn my players as much as they're going to learn from me. Like, this is to teach them how I run games and for them to teach me how I play, or like how they want to play. So yeah, this is basically going to be the first session. I'm not going to go into too much detail because I know some of my players watch this, so I can't get into a whole bunch of stuff. But this is how I kind of come up with settlements, because this entire settlement is based around this conflict. And how the players interact will determine the outcome of this conflict. And ultimately, the end result will be how the settlement moves forward from this. So the players will still have severe impact in how the settlement goes forward from here. And I like that. It makes the players feel impactful in the story. So yeah, these are my thoughts. This is Dougy's DM Diary. Follow me on TikTok at Dougy's the DM. You might be listening to this on YouTube or Spotify. You can go check the other one out respectively. For those of you that are watching on YouTube, please subscribe. Pretty much how I'm going to do it from now on is if I can't find a podcast guest for Thursdays, I'll be doing these DM diaries, and hopefully they do well. I don't know. So let me know what you think. Leave comments. I read them all, and please like this for the algorithm. But anyway, I'm going to get out of your hair, so I'm out of here. Deuces.